This is Democracy Watch. Mark, we have a major update here as we continue to follow Republicans redrawing maps mid-cycle in state after state. Some of the more high-profile states that we've had thus far have been, of course, Texas and Missouri. We've also been waiting for Indiana, Ohio, and Florida to drop their new maps, but we have a new entrant into this whole arena. Can you explain what just happened?
Yeah, North Carolina Republicans have announced that they are now going to engage in mid-cycle redistricting and take what is an avowed partisan gerrymander. That's one of the things that makes this, frankly, a little bit different, is that, North Carolina passed their current map saying we are engaging in a partisan gerrymander. And they are now, nevertheless, because Donald Trump wants even more grotesque gerrymanders, they are in the competition for the worst gerrymander in the country. And so they have now announced they will be drawing a new map later in October.
So what does this mean in terms of the current composition and what they could possibly squeeze out of this thing?
Yeah, so the current map is 10-4, and there isn't really much that Republicans can squeeze out of this, because if you look at the population around Charlotte and you look at the population around the Raleigh-Durham, Chapel Hill area, the so-called triangle, there's just not that much more to be gained here. And that's, by the way, having already gerrymandered the area around Greensboro, which would otherwise be a natural area for a Democratic seat. So they will probably look to target the seat held in the eastern portion of the state by a Democrat in kind of the northeastern quadrant. It's a bit of a swing district now, but they're going to have trouble both politically and legally. So let's unpack those. On the political front, they're going to have trouble because that district has a large African-American population, and those voters are going to need to go somewhere, right? I mean, notwithstanding the fact that the Republicans would probably like them to just disappear or not be able to vote, they're going to have to go in someone's district. And then legally, what they are about to do is totally illegal. Like, what they are about to do is so fucking illegal, it makes the people in Texas like perk up and be like, hey, what they're doing in North Carolina, what do you complain about us in Texas? What they're doing in North Carolina is really illegal, right? Which is they are going to be targeting black voters again. Now, my law firm is already suing North Carolina over their last illegal gerrymandered map. This, I can promise the people in North Carolina, the Republicans, if you do this, you're going to get sued again and you're going to lose. But look, there is right now no penalty that Republicans see for engaging in these grotesque forms of illegal gerrymandering, because they figure even if they lose, they get on the dance card of the Donald Trump sycophants, right? They get praised by for the effort to disenfranchise black voters.
Now, there is already an egregious gerrymander in North Carolina. This is basically a 50-50 state. This is a state where there are a bunch of Democratic statewide officials, and yet Republicans still have a 10-4 majority in their congressional delegation. And so it can go either way, and yet there already exists this egregious gerrymander. And so if the courts were willing to let that slide, why would they serve as an effective bulwark if Republicans try to gerrymander this thing even more?
Yeah, great question. So to your point, the governor of North Carolina is a Democrat. The attorney general in North Carolina is a Democrat. The secretary of state in North Carolina is a Democrat. How do we know that? Well, we know it because we pay attention to elections in North Carolina, but we also know it because, as you and I have discussed in other videos, this was the reason why they had to transfer power over elections to the auditor. Remember, this is the thing where they're like, we need a statewide Republican, so we'll find the auditor and we'll give the auditor the authority over elections. So, you're right. This is a 50-50 state. It is narrowly gone for Donald Trump. But it has the statewide elected officials held by Democrats. My bet is that Roy Cooper, the former governor, will soon be the next senator from North Carolina in 2026. He's a Democrat. So this is a 50-50 state. And when partisan gerrymandering was briefly illegal in North Carolina before they contorted this through state Supreme Court elections, when it was illegal, we actually saw a very different map, right? We saw a map that was a slight tilt towards Republicans. I think it was 8-6 Republican map. And it was only after partisan gerrymandering was blessed by the state Supreme Court this flipped. So that's the backdrop. But to your question, why will it be different? Because the federal courts are here to protect the rights of black voters not to be racially gerrymandered, not to be sorted, not to be discriminated against based on race. That is what the claims are in North Carolina already. That's what the new claims will almost certainly be, if not additional claims in North Carolina. We'll wait to see what they do, whether there are additional claims. And those are, of course, what the claims are in Texas, a state where we are awaiting a court ruling after the federal courts there held a 10-day hearing on whether Greg Abbott's map, that whole thing, whether that's constitutional. So there's a lot going on across the country, and that's the reason why I need everyone to subscribe to this channel, right? So what you get from subscribing to this channel is that when there is new news on the redistricting front, or really anything about voting, Brian and I immediately do a video to bring you up to date on what's happening, and it's really the only place you're going to get that information. So go ahead right now, click the subscribe button and hit the bell, because if you hit the bell, what happens is you get alerted, you get a notification when there is new content.
Well, I appreciate that. And I would also highly recommend for folks who are watching right now, if you're not yet signed up for Democracy Docket, which is the news outlet that Mark founded to focus on everything voting elections. That's actually where I found out about this story. And it's often the very first one to cover all of this voting rights news. So I'm going to put that link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. If you're not yet signed up and you want to support the invaluable work of Mark and his team, please make sure to sign up. Mark, on that point of recognizing that Republicans are not letting anything stand in their way of enacting these mid-cycle redraws, we have seen Gavin Newsom and California Democrats stand up and serve as a bulwark to be able to neutralize what Texas is doing. So Texas passed a map to be able to flip 5 seats from blue to red. So California said, you want to take away 5 seats? We're going to have a map that basically neutralizes exactly what you do in Texas. We have other weapons on the left, but we've yet to see any movement from any of these states where Democrats have the ability to redraw their maps. And I'm talking about states like Oregon, like Washington, like Maryland, Illinois, New Jersey, New York, Colorado. And so are Democrats doing enough right now to stand up in light of what we're seeing at the hands of Republicans?
Look, I think that everyone needs to do more. And so I'm not just going to fault those particular states. I'm just going to say in general, we all need to do more. You know, I try to do more every single day. I know you do. My law firm and I, we fight in court to do more. And yeah, I would ask every Democratic elected official, whether you're in federal office or state office, whether you're a governor or a state legislator, you know, what more can you do? You know, or I came on your show, and people can go back and find these episodes right when this was beginning. And I said, look, I thought that Democrats collectively ought to put 30 Republican seats at risk. And I stand by that. I mean, I'm not backing away from that, because I think that unless they see that we will not just match them, but that we will exceed them, they have no incentive to back away.
Right. There's no deterrent.
Right. So look, that remains my position. But my job as a lawyer is to do the things I can do in court. And so that's what I'm going to be up to.
In terms of the other states at Republicans' disposal, I know that I had mentioned Ohio, Indiana, and Florida. Is there any other states that you're tracking right now, aside from North Carolina, that may be potential weapons as we head toward 2026 midterms?
Yeah, so Republicans said explicitly that they're looking at Kansas, where they would target Sharice Davis's district. There is a different issue, but more skullduggery by Republicans going on in Utah, where the courts there ordered a fair map, and now Republicans are trying to undo that there. I mean, they'll do this everywhere where they possibly can. They have no shame. Right. And so when you fight against people who are shameless, you know, you need to recognize that there is no limit to how low they will go. And the big thing like looming in the background, right, the thing that you and I have talked about, and I know we're going to talk about this some more in the weeks and months to come, is that the Supreme Court is going to hear this big case. We did a video on it, and maybe we can link to that video in the description here so people can see it, about a case that is going to be argued in the Supreme Court on Wednesday. And like I said, the link to that is in the description below. And that case is going to decide the fate of the Voting Rights Act. And if they strike down the Voting Rights Act, particularly if they do it early in the year, like let's say they do it in early January, then you could expect Republican state after Republican state after Republican state that in the deep South to re-gerrymander. And we've already seen that Republicans in Louisiana have suggested they may do that. This case is actually out of Louisiana, but you would expect to see that in Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, Georgia, wherever, South Carolina, Florida, right? Texas, maybe even again. So that's a big case to watch. Now, that's not saying we're going to lose that case. It's not saying that this Voting Rights Act will be struck down, but that is the other thing out there to watch for.
And so as we look at North Carolina, for example, why do you think that Republicans are moving right now to redraw these maps, knowing that on Wednesday, the Supreme Court is going to hear a case that would allow them to basically unshackle themselves as it relates to, making sure that they include these Black opportunity districts when, we may see in a couple of months the Supreme Court issue a ruling that says, you know what, that's not even going to be a condition of maps anymore. And so just, run wild, basically. You can gerrymander without having to worry about Black or brown opportunity districts in any of these states. And that would really open up the aperture in terms of what Republicans, like those Republicans in North Carolina, can do.
Yeah, look, I think we've made a mistake if we think that Republicans are done mid-cycle redistricting, right? I mean, to the extent anyone thought that Republicans wouldn't start redistricting this cycle, then they were playing by a different rule book, right? We talked when Donald Trump took office that there are no norms, there are no rules, there is nothing that he and the Republican Party will not stoop to, and that includes doing mid-cycle redistricting. Well, I'm here to tell you that if they get any opening from the Supreme Court, they will go back and redistrict again. Right. I mean, Texas will go back and redistrict again. North Carolina will go back and redistrict again. Indiana, we think that somehow there is a limit to the depravity of and willingness of Republicans to undercut and subvert democracy, and we do that at our peril. And like I said, that's the reason why, going back when, and I give credit to Gavin Newsom, but, I said that California ought to do 9 seats. I called on all of these states to lay down a marker to the Republicans and say, look, we are prepared to go maximalist. And so you can either call Texas off and and settle this whole thing now, or this is what's going to happen. And I'm worried that Republicans think, okay, they paid the price of 5 seats in California. And again, kudos to Gavin Newsom and Republicans and Democrats in California for doing that. But, they're now just going to think, well, that's as far as Democrats will go.
Yeah. And again, I know that we had spoken about this a couple of minutes ago, but I do hope that the J.B. Pritzkers of the world and the Wes Moores of the world, if we're lucky enough to see Mikey Sherrill win in New Jersey and Abigail Spanberger win in Virginia, and to keep those Democratic majorities there, that they recognize the duty that they have, not just to their states, not just to their political party, but to democracy more broadly, to step up when they're needed, and they're needed now to counteract what the Republicans are doing, because what the Republicans are trying to do is scientifically engineer permanent majorities for themselves in the House so that they never lose the House again. And it's incumbent upon all of these Democratic officials in positions of power to recognize that what's needed in extraordinary moments is not ordinary responses. And so this is the opportunity that they have to be able to stand up.
Right. So I will say, I agree with everything you said. And, I've said it about all of those states.
Yeah.
I will say, if you look at the states that are where there is less juice to squeeze, you wind up looking at Maryland and Illinois. I mean, so yes, I think that there's more that they could do there, but there's not much more they could do. Yeah. When you compare that to Virginia, for example, a state that I live in, which right now has in my view, a gerrymandered map in favor of Republicans, and there is a lot more Democrats could do there. And kudos to you. You've held a number of these governors' feet to the fire, in your interviews of them. And I don't want to pick out any one or another, but some of these governors are sitting on states that honestly, there's a lot more juice that could be squeezed.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this isn't the end of this conversation by a long shot, so we'll continue to do so. With that said, I know that you've been covering this relentlessly on Democracy Docket. So again, for those who are watching, if you're not yet subscribed, please do yourself a favor and subscribe. It's not just an amazing resource that I use on a daily basis, but it's a great way to support Mark and his team who are fighting for democracy on the front lines in the courts where it matters most. So again, that link is right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Mark Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.